Okay, look, I had a few options when committing to the premise of review every TT LEGO game, and that was to start at LEGO Star Wars 1 and 2, miss Bionicle Heroes before going straight into LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga. This would mean that a fat asterisk would have to be used disclaiming that I'm a fucking liar. Alternatively, I could cover this game first and then go through the 3 original LEGO Star Wars games in a larger video. I chose that option because it means that I don't just have Bionicle sticking out like a sore thumb in the middle of the series. I say that, there are a few other games that we're going to have to cover that are a bit like that, but just hear me out, we'll get to them. It also gives me the opportunity to talk about Bionicle for a little bit, so let's start with that. Bionicle was a sub-series of LEGO focusing on its own unique universe. A universe that was far from consistent, had extremely short attention spans when it came to developing anything, really. At the same time, it could be described that the joy people found from Bionicle was similar to that of following a long-running soap opera. People waiting for the next animation, advert, or product to learn just a little more about what's going to happen next, and it's that promise of something happening next that brings those people back, hence the soap opera comparison. I'll admit that I was hooked, and even though they're incredibly rough and are downright awful in places, I have my nostalgia for the Bionicle films, something that may be a topic for another video. That out of the way, what do you need to know about Bionicle to understand Bionicle Heroes? Well, if you were paying attention to what I just said, then you'll know the answer is absolutely nothing. What does it mean for a series that was as all over the place and inconsistent like this to then declare that a piece of media wearing its name is non-canon? I don't know, but video games, am I right? Right, the premise. In the world of Bionicle, characters can essentially evolve themselves through a number of circumstances, with the most common one being a mask of power. Once a Matoran, one of the inhabitants of this world, wears a mask of power, they are granted that mask's corresponding ability. Outside of this, Heroes acts as a sort of crossover title, showcasing characters throughout the Bionicle universe and essentially rewriting things so they can coexist. This is the Bionicle Hall of Fame, in other words. This does mean that this game can play fast and loose with the way this franchise works without fearing the need to adhere to the already wonky structure of the main series' canon. We play as an aforementioned Matoran, who washes ashore the island of Voya Nui. Why were we in a capsule out at sea? Right, I'm about to showcase my inner nerd, so brace yourself. Long ago, there was this big prick, Makuta Pterodax. He's still around though. Something William Afton something. Anyways, Makuta impersonated a person of power named Taraga Doom in order to manipulate the population of Matorans to climb into these capsules, which would comatose them and erase their memories. This was essentially done so Makuta could brainwash the Matorans completely, turning him into their messiah. It didn't work, he got turned into a popsicle, and the capsules were scattered at sea, with most ending up in Matanui, an island named after the giant robot god they were standing on. That last bit's not important. The result of this is that a Matoran pod washed up on the island of Voya Nui, where we're told about 6 monstrous Piraka who've taken over the island and have enslaved its people. Balta, one of the villagers, presents us with a mask that turns us into a Toa, an evolved Matoran who can use the power of the other masks. So, we set off to take down the nasty Piraka and save the day. That's it. I did it. I say I did it, of course, once again, with this being non-canon, a lot of the information can be played as fast and loose. Kind of, sort of, we'll get to that. Now we should talk about the game itself. It's a harsh opening. By that I mean there isn't one outside of the cutscene you get before the main menu. Which wouldn't be that bad if it wasn't for... Okay, this is bad, right? My eyes are bleeding and that's normal, right? The bloom and overall lighting from this game is beyond harsh, and it's only worse when you take into account the intense colour filters that overlay the screen from time to time. Normally I'd focus on anything but the graphical fidelity of the game, but it's hard to comment on an art direction I can't see. The camera is over the shoulder, as this is a third-person shooter, but with the effects on screen it's difficult for me to focus on too much outside of, well, the effects on screen. Someone in the comments is going to scream the words MODS, and if I've checked out some super duper fan version of the game. A few things to note about the way I play most games for the sake of a review or discussion. I always want the vanilla experience first. If it's bad, then it's bad. Telling me to mod the game and improve it tells me that there's a fundamental problem with the base game, and if I didn't opt to cover that original experience, then I'm not reviewing the game itself. I'd be reviewing the mod that someone else made attached to it. It's why I get nervous about covering ports and remakes before the original title, because I'm not confident that I'm actually covering the original product. That's not me putting down the idea that a suggested mod would improve my time with this game, but that I have a very good reason for not exploring that for this video. On top of this, I want to play the original game in the way that I deem to be the most comfortable. As a result, you're seeing the GameCube version so we can sit down with a controller without the need to remap and guess button inputs. This is Bionicle at its purest, without me modifying it in any shape or form. And yes, it looks rough. I think a part of that also has to do with Bionicle's inconsistent art style. Character models look great, straight from the products themselves. My issue is more to do with everything surrounding those models. This is something I'll be bringing up in future videos, but Traveller's Tales never seem to be too sure on what should and shouldn't be a part of the LEGO aesthetic. You may deem this to be a small thing, but it hurts the readability of the environment quite a bit. You'll always know that something fitting in with the LEGO style can be broken and something that isn't can't be. But that rule isn't consistent either, as some LEGO parts can't be interacted with in the same nature as others, and some can't be interacted with whatsoever. So the visual information the game gives me is that if I see something made using Bionicle or LEGO parts, it might be interactive. Now, pair that with the bloom screen filters, over-the-shoulder camera, and tight level design, and you get what I consider to be a mess visually. Most weapons tend to have a large effect with them as well, effectively blinding a part of the screen momentarily. It's true that with enough time you can start to decipher the madness on the screen, so that's not to say it's completely incoherent, but it can be a shock to be thrown into this without much warning. The typical loop of Bionicle heroes will be familiar to fans of Traveller's Tales' later work, as you'll be going to a room where there'll be several levels connected by a specific theme. Completing each level will unlock the next one along, however there are multiple level select rooms which you can tackle once they've become available. Doing so will grant the player new characters, a load of LEGO pieces, this game's currency, collectibles in the form of canisters, and a cutscene or two to further the narrative. Outside of the level select room is the game's hub, where you can spend your LEGO pieces at the store in exchange for character upgrades, hints, and bonuses, all of which I'll talk about later on. There's also a trophy room where you can view the collectibles you've gained for the canisters. Once again, that'll be something I'll touch upon later. For now, let's talk about the levels and what you'll be doing for the most part in Bionicle Heroes. Much like future Traveller's Tales entries, there are two sides to talk about: the story mode and a collectible run. Free play doesn't exist yet, but the reason for that is that everything within a level that can be collected through the masks available for that level. I'll put that to one side for now, as I'll talk about the logistics of what's going on through a level first. You'll begin each level with two default masks. These masks will represent your lives and will also present you with a specific elemental power, as previously mentioned. Your job is to progress through each level and reach the end. Occasionally you'll be stopped by a large interactable object that will require a specific mask to use, or hero mode. Hero mode is achieved by collecting LEGO pieces, which in turn fills up a dedicated meter. Once done, you'll turn gold for a while, become invincible, and it will give the player a damage multiplier whilst being able to interact with any of the interactable gold models in the area. You would then assume, because of the damage trade-off and the invincibility, that hero mode is something you'd seek out as often as possible, not even mentioning the times when it's required to progress through an area, which is often. The answer is yes, absolutely. So what's the catch? That's the issue. There isn't one. Hero mode will last as long as the section of a level you're in, and will end contextually. That being said, it doesn't take that much effort to recharge the meter and start it all over again. This robs the game of a number of things. Chiefly, it means that entering this mode feels like you're entering your default state for the game. It's like in Super Mario Bros. When you use a mushroom to enhance Mario's strength and gift him an extra life point. Regardless of what additional power-up you get in that game, that default double-sized Mario will appear as the norm as long as you play the game well enough. The thing is, in the original Super Mario Bros., you can beat the game happily without the need to power up. It's a safety blanket on top of the base game. The momentum is still there for you to do everything that's required of you, just with a higher risk. This is why I'm conflicted with Hero Mode. The game gives it a gameplay reason for existing. Each area becomes a minor challenge to gain Hero Mode, and then use it to progress, but with how easy it is to achieve it, starts to feel like the game is padding. With the mushroom analogy, there's still a risk of dying or reverting back if you screw up, but here, Hero Mode presents you with invincibility for an indefinite amount of time as long as you're in a section of the level or performing something contextual. So without Hero Mode, you can't progress through the game normally, and you'd be handicapping yourself because instead of the question mark blocks in Mario that can be ignored with ease, Lego pieces are everywhere and are rewarded to the player for doing almost anything. So you complete a section of the game, move on to the next only to find Hero Mode has been deactivated by the game itself. Then a cutscene displays that you'll need it for getting through the next section, and so you start your Lego piece hunt again, which only lasts a minute or two before you regain the power-up. Allow me to address what I'd imagine the largest argument against my criticism here. And just to be clear, I'm declaring that the process of getting Hero Mode again and again is padding at best and tedious at worst. The argument I can picture is that it forces the player to engage with the level. I agree with that, but it doesn't solve the fault of Hero Mode itself. That engagement is picking up Lego pieces, something that can be achieved by simply walking. Sure, it's quicker to use your weapons, kill enemies, interact with the scenery and destroy objects, but that's not required to activate Hero Mode. Keep in mind I'm still referring to the story mode side of things. Talking about the base game without the collectibles reveals how little of this game you actually have to interact with, and I use the term interact with loosely. Even when you gain Hero Mode or are required to switch to a mask and use its ability, you're not solving a problem, but holding or pressing a button and then watching an unskippable cutscene. The only other step that may be required is picking up a mask, and if it's required, it will always be right in front of you. That is the compulsory loop for this game. Pick up a mask right in front of you, pick up Lego pieces, enter Hero Mode, tap a button to watch a cutscene, unlocking the next area. Rinse and repeat. There are a few breaks to this loop which come in the form of an on-rail section which lasts seconds, and the occasional boss fight. These don't require anything different from the player though. Say you want to enter Hero Mode faster, then you're more than likely going to use your weapons. Each enemy has their own health bar, which is a pretty good sign when it comes to a shooter. More so in regards to the fact that you can easily identify how much damage each weapon does. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a large enough difference, and considering how easy each mask is to obtain and the size of each arena being similar, you're choosing more for the aesthetic. That's not to say that the practicality of each weapon is the same, but rather that the game rarely puts you into a scenario where you'd even consider it. You'll be given something like the Matoro mask, which has a scope allowing for a longer range, but most circumstances where it can be found, it would just take as much effort to use it and angle it correctly as it would to just waltz on over the few steps and use any other weapon. Even the Hyuki mask grants you a rocket launcher, which you'd naturally assume would be effective against tougher enemies, especially ones you can't quite reach with other weapons, but I mostly found the mask itself floating around tight spaces and its utility to be better as a shotgun. The Xiao and Hali masks are both rapid fire weapons, with a medium range making them almost identical practically. The Kongu mask is a shotgun, which is largely outdone by the Helki mask, except for its fire rate, which is quicker but damages for slightly less. Last is the Nuparu mask, which fires bombs, a short range alternative to the Hilki mask once again, and slightly worse because there's a delay on using something that might be useful as a trade-off when choosing between certain weapons, but once again the damage output isn't that different. I can picture these weapons being useful in a game that encourages a tactical approach, but Bionicle Heroes rarely doesn't. Most arenas that have enemies too far for most weapons will have those enemies move towards you, making the ability to deal damage with any weapon a matter of time and not a challenge. So, does this game do anything to compensate? It tries, and I'll give it credit for that at least. The aforementioned shop grants the player the ability to upgrade the health of a mask, the damage of the weapon you're using, as well as a special ability. It's unfortunate that they're all fairly cheap and that the special ability acts as your way to get the unobtainable collectibles from each level. I'm framing that as a negative because it acts as the same method of progression as Hero Mode, just a far longer variant. You're not being challenged in unlocking these because LEGO pieces are abundant. You're not being challenged in finding out where to use these because they are signposted. And you're not being challenged when using these because it works in the same way as every other ability in the game. Walk up to the marked point and press a button. In this sense, bosses are the only mandatory interactable things in the game that require more than just a button press to get past them. You have to aim and press a button or hold down the strafe button that will lock onto them. Of course, during a boss fight you'll have to kill all of the smaller enemies or find enough LEGO pieces to enter Hero Mode and then use the same ability you've been using throughout the whole game to activate a cutscene to progress. It's just that in a boss fight you'll have to do this several times in succession. This means entering the arena, gather LEGO pieces to enter Hero Mode, use Hero Mode to activate the cutscene, and then rinse and repeat until they're about halfway down on their health. When this happens, you'll have to wait for them to become vulnerable, shoot them once, and then wait again. Upgrading your masks will speed up the process ever so slightly, as you can destroy already weak enemies slightly quicker. You'll still have to wait the same amount of time for them to become vulnerable and utilise the same Hero Mode to proceed past that point.
The only other aspect about the main story missions I haven't mentioned is that each mask has a secondary ability which allows them to, well, not do much else. As Jala, you can walk on lava, and Hallie can walk on water. Even in their designated biomes, this rarely crops up and it's often redundant. Kongu can jump to a designated location, which will often have a mask you can pick up. Once again, it's a rarity that this is actually worth it. Loki can construct things, which appears the most, but is still just a button prompt. Lastly, Naparu can climb designated areas, which requires just a button prompt again. None of these abilities require any more thought than select the signposted mask or press the dedicated button that changes you to the right mask automatically, and then press a button. So, if you were to remove all of the barriers that serve as nothing more than padding in this game, how would it turn out? This would mean removing Hero Mode models and blockades, along with reducing or outright removing the wait time between when an enemy is invincible and when they're not. It would be a very short and mind-numbing experience. The actual substance of the story missions have the player walk in a very linear direction, often marked on your minimap, find the end of the level or a boss. If it's a boss, then you have to shoot them, one for each heart piece they have. That's with all of the buffer taken out. Put those barriers back in does pad the game out and give the player significantly more to do, but it's not in a positive sense. The player isn't doing anything that would require more than an analog stick and the ability to press a single button. Something basic such as a timed puzzle involving the specific elemental guns would be better than this. Hell, the idea that these are elemental weapons is never a factor. The Jala mask doesn't set things on fire, and the Matoro mask doesn't freeze or slow down objects and enemies. A simple puzzle where there's an ice blocking your way and you have to use the Jala mask would be better than nothing. It's not hard to upgrade that into actually requiring more thought than the type of mask you'd need either. Have a Metroid Prime style bomb switch that would unlock a timed door you need to get to the ice block. Then it would need you to time a Napora bomb, switch to Jala as he is the fastest mask mobility wise, and then use his fire beam to melt the ice before the door shuts. It's incredibly bare bones, but at least the need to think justifies its existence. Just that basic idea of a timed attack opens up so many puzzle ideas in my noggin. The bomb is also a physics-based weapon. Imagine a boss where the only way to attack it is to fire a bomb in an arc over a wall. Maybe the boss has a shield where the roof is vulnerable and the bomb is the only weapon that reaches it. Even looking at the other elemental type weapons like, once again, an ice gun. Have an enemy that has a large amount of health and is slightly faster than you, incentivizing the idea of slowing it down. Admittedly, my ideas aren't a lot, and I'm sure you could poke holes in them if you thought about them for long enough, but at least it's using some form of thought outside of collect Lego pieces. Challenge is what this game is truly lacking, and I don't think it's a large job to insert a fraction of that into this game, as I've hopefully displayed. So, what does the structure of each hub look like? We might be doing the same things in each level, but at least the reasons for doing them can be framed contextually different, right? There are 6 zones, with 4 levels each, after all. It would make sense to at least provide us with a different reason for doing each one. That's the thing about cutscenes in a game. You can frame them however you want as long as they gel enough with the gameplay. Considering this is a non-canon entry with no limits to what they can do, I'd say it would be extremely easy to go nuts with this. Okay, so Vezok's coastline has you defeat a boss who's in your way, pick up a sphere, defeat another boss who's in your way, and then defeat Vezok. There is no dialogue delivered, and the only reason for the bosses being here is because Vezok put them here. Because he's evil. Vezon, the super bad of the game, will show up after defeating Vezok, and you'll have to fight him for a bit. There's not much else, if anything else, to this contextually or in a narrative sense. I'm not cutting corners when I say that's it. So, what about another zone? Yeah, nothing's different. Every first mission, you'll have a henchman placed in front of you. The second mission will have you pick up a sphere. The third will have you fight another henchman. And the final will have you up against the bad of the area. The gameplay loop mentioned from earlier is the same throughout, and most cutscenes are played for laughs and not to add anything to the narrative. Going back to the Super Mario comparison, your mission is to save the princess. The same trope is played when you finished a world where you'll be told that the princess is in another castle, but what sticks all of this together are the levels themselves. Super Mario doesn't have the entire lore catalogue of Bionicle to play about with, so there are no expectations in place for its premise. That being said, if you still somehow thought that the narrative of Super Mario Bros. Was underwhelming, then the gameplay holds it all up. No 2 levels are entirely alike in structure, and whilst they may require you to perform the same task of getting to the end, there will be a variety of obstacles in the way that will encourage you to approach each level differently. With Bionicle Heroes, I'm actually convinced that the adverts have more to go off of than the sum of this game's narrative. The motivation for you to get from A to B is unclear. From the start of Mario, a Gumbo is already approaching, and with one tap you're dead. These things are evil, and they've showcased it. You have to play the game for Mario to survive. The invisible wall prevents you from going back, so your only option for safety is to keep moving forwards. Some enemies respawn, so standing still isn't always an option. In fact, that countdown prevents that from happening. Everything in Super Mario Bros. Gameplay-wise encourages the player to keep going. Here we have a cutscene showcasing that not only is the player distanced from what's happening, but the main blank protagonist is as well. We start in a hub, and the only reason to play a level of this game is because there's nothing else to do. I mean, the Paraka haven't done anything to us yet, and we're not being forced to help out, so really the only reason the player is heading into the first level of Paraka Bluff is to prevent boredom and perhaps to justify why they own this game. Going from the lore angle of things, the Borok, Vesorak, and Vaki are baddies out to get you, but let's not forget that this is, once again, not canon. Even the villager that tells us of his plight isn't overly convincing, as he immediately vanishes after telling you to assassinate 6 people. He lives in a shop after this, but he never comments on your progress or even says a simple hello. It's only when you enter a level when the enemies of this game will start to attack you, in which case, yeah, buckle up and mow them down. The issue here is that you actively have to put yourself into a dangerous situation to be motivated into doing anything. In this version of Bionicle, there is no context to this game prior to what we see from the opening cutscene. Even then, we can't trust that opening cutscene as fact because even as a character within this world, we're strangers to everything that's happening. If this sounds like I'm going too deep at this point, allow me to tell you that this is actually very shallow. Motivating your player to perform the main action your game is developed around should be one of the first things your game does. You don't need a narrative reason for this, as shown by the Mario example. That being said, this is a Bionicle game. It's in the title, and yet it's not a Bionicle game. It's asking the player to have outsider's knowledge of who the baddies are, but at the same time it's telling the player to go easy on them because they're actually different. A very simple example of this is Gorak, this game's first boss. They are a real character within the Bionicle universe prior to this game. Fans of the series may see the name and connect the dots. At the same time, the game has been announced as non-canon. So what does that mean for the character? Well, it could mean anything. Gorak is a member of the Rakshi, an armoured drone created by Makuta, but just because they were evil in one narrative doesn't mean they can't be good here. Then you meet and fight them, only for the boss to feel fairly identical to most that come after. The long and short of this critique section is that Traveller's Tales try to have their cake and eat it, and it kind of falls flat on all angles. Applying the law of Bionicle to this game doesn't work, because there are far too many contradictions involving the appearance of characters who didn't coexist in the same period of time. Taking the law away and approaching this as a newbie makes the narrative come across as shallow. A cutscene plays at the start to try and set things up, but that's all you get. Removing the cutscene would clear up some of the confusion, and starting the game within the first level would at least establish the Paraka as a threat to the player personally. Along with this, if the game identifies me as a stranger both as a player and as a character, then the first thing I'll be asking is, what's in it for me? My character is a blank slate with no morals, and I as a player, especially if I'm new to the series, have no investment in keeping this place safe. So the game sticks a random character in front of me asking for my help in killing 6 supposed warlords that have taken over this island, and then that question kicks in. We haven't started the level yet, so I'm going off of the word of a stranger. And that's where the obvious fix comes in. Make the protagonist a pre-existing member of this village. It's not incredibly strong, but at least it's easier to understand why we might want to protect this place as a character who lived here. The place may still feel disconnected, but they'd understand this game's events a little more clearly. This is also still going off of the fact that the opening cutscene happened. If the only motivator I had going forward was curiosity, then that's something. Ironically, that's more of a motivator than go kill 6 people because I said they were bad, because at least I'm the instigator for the rest of the game. At the end of the day, Bionicle Heroes has a structural problem with its premise and narrative, and this is me referring to it in isolation to anything else. There is simply no substance to this narrative or world. We don't get to meet another villager or even another person who will talk to us. We have no attachment to the world we're wandering around. The villains only interact with us if we decide to descend onto their territory, and we're never rewarded for our efforts outside of ways to make invading this foreign territory easier. At the shallowest level, the motivational factor that kind of works here is the fireworks of it all. As a Bionicle fan, you can see and interact with mostly Bionicle things. You can see Bionicle characters move and look at the Bionicle Heroes case and say, "It says Bionicle!" I don't like to encourage this mindset, as it has very little to do with the quality of the product itself, but I can imagine that on some artificially subjective level, it's enough to please someone out there. None of this is mentioning what this game is like on a second playthrough, more specifically on a playthrough for hunting collectibles. I have dipped in and out of these, even explained how to get them using the alternative mask powers, but I honestly think that the second trip around drained me more than the first. Unskippable cutscenes, and with the aforementioned gameplay loop again, yeah, this is a rough game to 100%. On a subjective level, I'm someone who likes seeing counters go up. I like collecting items in games to the point where even in terrible games, I'll still attempt to go after the collectibles simply because I find a satisfaction in seeing that number increase. Because of the linear nature to each level, you'll be playing through the game again, only for longer. If you found the first go repetitive, then the second will come off as worse, which it does. Your reward for the round trip is a final cutscene that teases a game that was cancelled. Have fun with that, I guess? Upgrading the masks takes no time whatsoever due to the low cost to do so, and the only major roadblock are the Vezon blocks, which requires the titular boss's mask, obtained by defeating him after completing the rest of the game. In just about every sense, this game feels like it's throwing the player on autopilot to the extent where a literal requirement to fully beat the game and to get the true ending is to do the exact same thing you've done the first time around, but remembering to press the same ability button on the black pieces as well. Quitting out afterwards doesn't save your progress, so you have to play the game twice in full. I don't consider Bionicle Heroes to be a bad game. It's functional. It does what it does without issue. And by that I mean that it gives the player things to do. They're not incredibly engaging, but as I have said, they're functional. Considering how linear the levels are, and by that I mean they might as well be a straight line, but they're not bad. I can mentally equate this game to a dot-to-dot. Follow the line and you're done without struggle. Collecting Lego pieces and spending them can make the already easy experience easier. You can unlock hints that tell you how to play the game instead of being actual prompts. You have to pay in-game money for the in-game tutorial. Or how about a really cheap 50% discount on everything, making the existence of buying this discount extremely stupid and act as nothing more than more fodder. You can even buy a canister locator, making the whole point of searching for them redundant. You get the point. This is a very anti-game game. It works on the level of it being tied into a well-known brand, in the same way that putting up a Bionicle poster does. Except this poster already has blue tack on it, and a person who comes into your house to put it up for you. The most convoluted this gets is when referring to that wider context, but it's clear that the developers really don't want you to think about that. Just associate the positive aspects of Bionicle onto this product without thinking any further. As a first venture into this LEGO video game series, I oddly got what I thought I would, at least on the video game side of things.